In order to become great in the eyes of God, you must first become little. What's up, everybody? It's Ricky,
And it's Adrian.
and we're back with another episode of Small Like Paul. We are so excited and blessed to be bringing another episode to you guys. And today's a very cool one. We just started a new series pretty recently, basically called "What Paul Says About," and today's topic is called contentment. Um, Now, when I'm talking about contentment, I'm not talking about like content, like like the premium content that we're trying to bring you guys right now. Actually, I'm not talking about content per se. It's actually the state of being content. And so you might be asking yourself, like, why is that important? Well, we think it's important because Paul actually talks about it a lot in his letters, right? And so whatever Paul talks about in his letters, we think is pretty important to everything in regards to our faith. He's kind of the G when it comes to all that kind of stuff. So I kind of created a working definition based off of Google, the Google definitions, like the Webster's dictionary definitions, and also kind of how Paul defines it. And it's basically contentment is a state of satisfaction or peace regardless of your circumstance. I'll say it again, a state of satisfaction or peace regardless of your circumstances, right? So that's what we're talking about today, is being content regardless of your circumstance. And so we're really excited to get into that today. Age, you really, wanted to get into this. We were talking about this the other day. We were talking about topics we could do, and you really wanted to do this.
Yeah, I did. This was heavy on my heart because I don't know. I'm just at the point in my life where I'm kind of done with the whole negativity. Just thinking negative of myself or of situations. I think the past year really brought to light, what contentment really is. A lot of people lost their jobs, unfortunately. A lot of people, are going through rough times, or we're going through rough times. And I was fortunate enough to have that job throughout the entire time, and I still have the same job. And I think so do you, Ricky, and I think a lot of people do too. And there was a point where I just I want to change. I want a new job, and sometimes you get annoyed because you have to go into work and all that. And it was just I had to really stop myself and think what am I complaining about, man? Like I just got to be content, in any given situation. So that's just it's really simple. It's really just it's just really a way of life, a way of living, and you just got to turn that switch on. So with that being said, let's go ahead and read the first verse here, what Paul has written in Philippians. So this is Philippians 4:11-12. He says, "Not that I speak from need, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am. I know how to get along with little, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need." So, Paul talks about it here. He not only talks about, just in any given circumstance, he's learned to be content, but he also says, I know how to get along with little. I think a lot of the time we want more. We want more always. And I don't think it's a bad thing to necessarily want more. I want more money. I think personally, I think I deserve more money. I want a raise. I want a new job that pays more. I want all these little things. But is that the deciding factor of whether I'm content or not? No. I should be content already. That won't change a thing. That's just a materialistic kind of ideology.
Yeah, it's really amazing because something that I've learned, at least in my life, and I think I've been able to apply it to so many different aspects of my life, especially my faith, and my walk with the Lord, is that a lot of people tend to seek after happiness. Like there's this desire for happiness. There's the movie Pursuit of Happiness, like all these different things that people want, that they feel like will help them achieve that happiness, right? But what I've learned, especially in my walk with the Lord, is we can seek after happiness, but happiness is fleeting. It's truly fleeting. Like it's gonna come one second and leave the next. And then sadness is also going to come, right? We're going to have trial. Like Jesus says this, you will have trouble in this world. But if we rather seek peace, right? And in that, like, we find that contentment, right? Like, no matter what, there's a beautiful song by Hillsong, Young and Free, called Highs and Lows. Highs and lows, in your mercy is an even flow, right? Lord, you'll never let me go. I'm butchering the lyrics right now, but basically the idea is, right, like, no matter what, in the highs or the lows, if I find the peace that comes from the person of Jesus Christ, we talked about that a little bit last episode, about anxiety. If I find the peace in the person of Jesus Christ, I'll be fine, because he's going to keep me dead in the center, no matter what. Like, the highs won't get me too high, the lows won't get me too low. And so what we thought about when we talked about this first verse and all the verses is that Paul is basically saying Jesus is the answer. Like, Jesus is the answer. Like, the key is finding contentment in Jesus. And that's the key to being content in suffering. Bro, we're in a fast right now. For all the viewers out there and the listeners, we are currently in the Exodus 90 fast, and that's something that we found is a huge key.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. And before I go on, I want to say that you didn't really butcher the lyrics. You more so butcher the melody. It's a great melody. You should have just sang it. Now every time I hear the song, I'm gonna hear you like spoken word it. Yeah. Speak it. I don't know. But anyways, yeah,
my voice is sore, bro. My voice is sore right now.
We actually just started Exodus 90 as you know, we're recording this. I think we're on day, I don't know, week 2, whatever. Don't think of the days, just go through it. But yeah, and we've talked about it before too, like the whole rejoice in the suffering, but this is a little different. This is like content in suffering. I mean, I also think about it in aspect of Lent, not allowing your right arm to see what your left arm does. I take that differently in the sense, obviously don't share what you're giving up, or when you give alms, like, don't go preach it out for your own glory, but also just be happy doing it. Don't suffer just to suffer. Suffer, live for it, live for the suffering. It's not something that you necessarily, like, you're dying for, you're living for it. And yeah, I mean, that's what we're kind of living through right now. And not to say, like, we're not, I mean, this suffering is nowhere near, what we've seen people suffer with, even, given, in third world countries and all that. But it's just the little things that you can do, and we're going to get more into that.
Yeah, we can definitely talk more about that. I think that's great. A great point and a great perspective to have. And at the end of the day, like you were saying, not necessarily like just telling everyone, hey, by the way, yo, I'm suffering. Like, like just being and living in that state of contentment, living in joy and having joy within the suffering, and embracing it as an opportunity, as we've talked about before, is the key. Our friend Father Brian actually has said this before. Age, you mentioned this, to not only to die to suffering, but to live for it, and not in a masochistic way, but truly to allow it to mold us and to shape us into who God's calling us to be. So I think that's great, and we're gonna move on to this next verse, and I'll read it real quick. It's a longer one, but we thought the entirety of it really encapsulated what we wanted to talk about today with contentment. So I'll get into it. So this is 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 through 12. Okay. So it says, but godliness actually is a means of great gain when accompanied by contentment. For we have brought nothing into the world, so we cannot take anything out of it either. If we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. But those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and many foolish and harmful desires which plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil, and some by longing for it have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. But flee from these things, you man of God, and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, perseverance, and gentleness. Fight the good fight of faith. Take hold of the eternal life to which you were called, and for which you made the good confession in the presence of many witnesses. That's the guide right there. He just gave you the guide. That's something that we talked about actually last time with anxiety, what Paul says about anxiety. If you guys haven't seen that episode, make sure you guys go check it out, or also listen to it wherever you get your podcasts and whatnot. But Paul gives such a practical guide as to how to deal with these things and how to live these things, right? In this case, we're talking about contentment. Right here in 1 Timothy chapter 6, he gives an amazing guide to how to live in contentment. And one of the keys that we really want to get into is to not live materialistically. I think that's a huge key.
It's huge. And it was like kind of like the first point we were kind of talking about, finding contentment in those material items. That's not the point. Yeah, of course they make you happy. Sorry, I was looking down here for some reason. Yeah, of course they make you happy. But true contentment comes just from itself, from its own being of just like just joyfulness, just the joy of living. And it's like, nothing in this world can make you happier than, Christ himself. Just like knowing his love for you, and knowing, the chance of salvation,
Amen.
Just that chance, just that chance alone should make you content,
Yeah.
So yeah, don't be materialistic, even though as hard as it is. I think that through Exodus now, doing this the second time, I'm really feeling it, trying to make more of an effort, because we're all called, I feel like we're called deeper this time around. And, we're all called deeper, whether you're doing Exodus or not, whether you celebrate Lent, how you should, it's just more of just detaching yourself from those things and just finding true contentment in the person of Christ.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it, especially in regards to fasting. Christ talks about prayer a lot in Scripture, but he also talks about a lot of these times where he mentions prayer, he talks about prayer and fasting. And part of the reason about that and why we were talking about not to be materialistic is because we get so attached to the things of this world. We get so attached to our phones. These things right here, they have like our entire world in them, right? Realistically. Yeah. And the thing is, if you place like your hope and all your, kind of your entire world in this little device as opposed to the person of Jesus, like it's going to be really, really difficult to live this life. Like Paul says it in this scripture, you came in here with nothing, you will leave with nothing but Jesus. If hopefully that's the goal, right? Like we will leave into the arms of Christ. And something that was actually interesting when we were looking through our Bible, because me and Age actually share the same Bible. We have the same. Well, we don't share it. We don't give it to each other on the weekends. But like we have the same kind of published the same published Bible, the New American whatever version it is. Anyways, we were looking at the footnotes, and it had the Greek for contentment that Paul is using in this specific scripture, which is autarkeia. I probably butchered that, but basically what he's saying is it comes from that Greek word, basically meaning the philosophical term for the virtue of independence from material goods. So what we're saying is, and what Paul is saying really is, replace your materialism with Jesus. Replace whatever it is that you have a crutch, with this world, whatever it is that you feel like super attached to, replace that with Jesus. Like that's what he calls us to in fasting, to make that sacrifice. And so I just think it's a huge key to what we're talking about today.
Yeah, that's a really replace with Jesus. That's just a good way to think about it. And also, if you interested in the Bible, we can put a link down. I think the publishers are our Sunday Visitor. We can put the link in the bio. Has a really good like footnotes and they go really they go in depth and they tell you where to find, like, it's just so good. It's so good. It's probably
Yeah.
one of the most thorough Bibles I've had the pleasure of reading.
Yes.
So let's move on to Corinthians. Paul says here it's very simple. It's one liner, but the one liners are the biggest ones in my opinion. He says, "Brethren, each one is to remain with God in that condition in which he was called." I'll say it one more time. Brethren, each one is to remain with God in that condition in which he was called. When I think about this one, when I read this verse, and read what Paul is saying, you think about a lot of different, interpretations of, what that means to be, to remain in the condition that you were called by God. But what comes to me the most is just not only being content with the things around you, with life, but being content with who you are. I think that's super important. Being content with the person of you, and not looking at yourself or having any sort of self-hatred towards yourself, or comparing yourself to others.
Yeah.
This is something huge that I dealt with a lot, especially like in the past couple years that I'm becoming more free of that, as of late. And last year during Exodus that really helped too, but it was just the aspect of just comparing yourself to others, comparing your treasures to others, comparing your achievements and where you are, if it's like your job or just financially, but I think most importantly too, comparing physical attributes and just maybe even your knowledge, your own wisdom to others. That's a tough one, and just being content with who you are and who God has made you, who has called you to be in the place that you are. Some of us are wealthier than others, some of us are poorer than others, and that isn't necessarily our own fault. That comes down from our parents, our upbringing and the situations that we've grown up in, and it's not their fault either. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying is that whole comparison act is terrible, and it'll bring you down, and just you have to learn to be content in the given situation that you are in, whatever situation that you're in, and with who you are as a person, and as a daughter or son of Christ.
Yeah, that's really good, man, because we were actually talking about, when we were getting ready for this, about how we live in such a comparison culture. Like, especially when it comes to social media, literally we're on our screens every single day comparing our lives to other people's lives. Like,
Yeah.
and the highlight reels that everyone always talks about. And it sounds like a cliche at this point, because we've all kind of audibly become aware of it, but no one really changes their mindset based off of it, right? Like, no one really adjusts. Oh, like I'm because we're all still comparing ourselves to one another, which is why I think the makers of Exodus were brilliant in saying that social media is one of the key components that we have to be staying off of during this fast, because there's a quote that says comparison is the thief of joy. Like, think about that. That state of satisfaction and peace. Like, you can't have perpetual joy if you're comparing yourself to people around you. And that even comes, and that might not necessarily come in like it might come in really innocent ways. Like, you might even compare yourself, to your friends, to your closest loved ones, honestly, in regards to their circumstances, or their family lives, or whatever, or their jobs.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to come from social media, but we do live in a comparison culture these days, and we kind of line ourselves up with each other. But what Paul is saying, and what we're trying to say is like, at the end of the day, we're called as Christians to compare ourselves to the person of Jesus Christ, like, point blank, period. Like, that's who we are. That's the only person that we're called to compare ourselves to, is to strive to become more like Jesus, and that's what he's calling us to. So we definitely wanted to talk about that. All right, let's move on. We only have a couple left. So, right, this one is 1 from the letter to Romans, chapter 8, verse 28. And Paul says, "And we know that God causes all things to work together for good for those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose." Right, so you might ask yourself off the bat, like, why do these guys include this one? This has nothing to do with contentment. Well, I think because of the fact that we know the God that we have, like we know who he is, we know who he's been in the past, or maybe you're going through a season of trial and turmoil, and it's tough to see kind of the light at the end of the tunnel, right? The way out. But this verse should be encouragement to you, because we know that God works all things together for good for those who love God. He brings beauty out of brokenness. He brings the good out of all the bad, out of all the ugliness of our lives. He makes good out of it. Good always comes out of bad, no matter if we can see it in the moment or maybe you see it years later. And so that's why we thought it would be important to include this verse, because off the bat you might think, oh, this doesn't really have to do with contentment. But we can be content because we know the God that we have. And then we can live through suffering to see the grace on the other side, because he's going to do it again.
Yeah.
He's going to do it again. And we believe that. That's what we believe as Christians. We have that faith. That's what faith is.
That's beautiful, bro. I have no comment on that. That was, I mean, you nailed it. It's really just, just faith. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Just being content in the person with God and knowing that he will provide. And I think actually, I mean, we can probably just go straight to the next one. Yeah. I think because I want to talk about something, but let's talk about it in the next one. But you read this one because you brought it up, and I want you to explain.
Listen, yeah, man. I mean, we had to include this bonus verse. This is our bonus verse for the day. And the reason that I call it a bonus verse is because kind of cheating a little bit right here, because this is from the book of Hebrews, from the letter to the Hebrews, and the author is unknown. A lot of people attribute it to Paul. A lot of people think Paul could have written it, but it's not known for sure whether or not Paul wrote this letter to the Hebrews. But we had to include it just because it's a really great verse. We think that it's a really good way to end things off today. And so this is it from the letter to the Hebrews. By the way, this is like one of my favorite books in the Bible. It's amazing. Okay, so this is Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5. And it says, "Make sure that your character is free from the love of money, being content with what you have. For he himself has said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you." And to let you guys know, this is in all caps. That last part, "I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you," that's in all caps in the version that we found. Just in case. Yeah, I love this verse.
Yeah, and I mean, you may hear this verse and think it's like kind of like repetitive with what we've been saying. Make sure your character is free from the love of money. Be content with whatever you have in whatever situation and who you are. But the difference here is that it reiterates, that he himself said, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you. And I think a lot of the times we literally think that. God has deserted us in some moments. And a funny story that happened recently. I think it's funny now. It wasn't funny at the time, but I had been applying to a job. I've been applying to jobs, and I got called back for a job maybe like 2 months ago, and I actually went through like a string of interviews. I want to say like 2 or 3 interviews through Zoom, and they seem to be going pretty well. I mean, once you get like 2 interviews in a row, like things are moving, you think in your head. So I emailed them, follow up maybe like a week after the last interview. And then they just basically told me that they went on with someone else, and I was fine. In my head, I was already thinking of like the cons. And I'm trying to practice contentment, in my given life, just trying to be content and understanding and accepting of God's will. That's something that's been on my heart, and that's like a desire that I have. And that's what I've been praying for recently, more so than more often is what I'm trying to say. Sorry. Got stumbled there. But anyways, so yeah, I moved on from that, and I kind of went on to applying to other jobs, whatever. But then like about 3 weeks ago, I want to say, I got contacted again from that same company, from the senior recruiter. And she was like, "Hey, Adrian, how are you?" And I was like, "Hi, how are you?" And she's like, "Are you still interested in this position?" And I said, "Of course I'm interested." So she booked me for another interview, another Zoom interview with someone else. They revamped, the company some way or another, and the position was still open. So I interviewed with the person. Things went well, in my opinion, and I think I kicked it off really well with the guy that was interviewing me, and things just felt smooth. They felt right. So a few weeks go by after that point, after that, second chance, I would say, and nothing happens. I don't hear anything. I send a follow-up email, and nothing's returned to my inbox. So I move on. I've already moved past the point of this job. I'm kind of over it. And on last Monday, actually, was the beginning. It was the day before we started Exodus. My coworker came into work, or I came into work. He was already there early, and I just said, "What's up? How are you? Good morning." And he said, "Hey, Adrian, I just want to let you know that my old boss contacted me last week, and he offered me a job. They offered me an interview, and then shortly a couple of days after, they offered me the job. So I'm gonna give my 2 weeks." And I was like, "Dude, that's awesome. I'm happy for you, man." I'm genuinely happy for the guy. And then we just keep talking about it. We're talking about it. It was just making jokes, whatever. And I said, "Dude, what's the company?" Because I don't know why I had that feeling to ask him. I just had the feeling to ask. I mean, it's kind of something you ask. So I just asked, "What's the company?" And he goes ahead and he says, the name of the company that I had been, had that run around for the past month or 2 months, with interviews and not hearing back, whatever. And I was just like, damn, in my head, I was like, for some reason I expected that answer. It was just that thing there where you kind of just expect him to say something. What are the possibilities? What are the odds? And the odds are right in front of me. And in that moment, I just looked at him and I said, "I'm so happy for you, man. That's awesome, dude. That's so awesome, bro. That's a good company." But still, I was cringing. It was a cringiness inside me, even though I had literally just forgotten about this. The fact that it came up, the fact that someone else got it that I knew, that sense of pride quickly rushed in, and it was oh, this doesn't mean that he's better than you in what you do. It just means that he had an in. It just means that he had an advantage for this position. And that all those thoughts were rushing into my head here and there, and as I would try to reject them, I started to really believe them, and I had to go to confession because I wasn't gonna go to confession about this, but my girlfriend Kara was like, "I think you should bring it up because it's obviously still bothering you." So I did, and actually it was really uplifting, and it really at that moment is when I realized in confession, it was wow, it's not that God deserted me in this moment, that he really grabbed something that could have been mine, and he just gave it to someone right next to me. It's not about that. It's the fact that he did that is more of a clarification to me, that this wasn't meant to be, that this isn't his will, and he had to take it upon, in that sense of my coworker out of I don't know how many applicants, getting that position, and my coworker telling it to my face, was almost God telling me, this isn't for you. This is not the time. This isn't my will. This is what I will for you. And it was that realization. It was the awareness of that, that I was just all right, take a deep breath. I'm content, Yeah. And since then I kind of just stopped kind of job searching. Not since then. I kind of did it. Was going in hard. After that, more I was all right, I gotta find a job now. But I think last week or the beginning of this week, I deleted all of my last week or the beginning of this week, I deleted all of my job searching apps, and I kind of made an oath to myself, like, I'm gonna try to be content where I am right now. I'm not going to just struggle and try to seek contentment through these through a new job, through a new I guess journey. Like, let me be content in this journey right now that God has it before me. So yeah, that was like a really big wake-up call. I mean, it was honestly a grace. But yeah, that's my story. That's the funny story. It's funny now.
I just think it's crazy that that it happened the day before Exodus started, and two, I found it funny how the telemarketer, the recruiter sounded like a telemarketer. Went the way that you imitated them, like he's like, you might be entitled for compensation, like whatever. I thought that was funny, but no, bro.
Yeah, she was fair. Yeah, she was really good at. Had a really good voice for it. Yeah.
I'm proud of you for that story, man. When you told me that, I was really proud of you because you took it on the chin, and you took it with contentment, with living, in that moment. You could have kind of really said, woe is me, been a victim, but you chose to encourage him and really like kind of just encourage just his future and all that kind of stuff, and just be a friend, just be a coworker, be a brother. That's amazing. And I think we were also thinking about, in regards to this topic, our experiences, at least seeing people, and you hear about this a lot, in regards to people from third world countries actually being content with what they have. I know you've experienced that age before, on mission. And I just think it's incredible. Now, this is interesting because it's like, okay, like it's not really comparing ourselves to people in third world countries as much as seeing it as an example of how we should try to live our lives, of having an attitude of gratitude, like being able to live in joy, rejoicing in our suffering, and being content with whatever we have. Because if people in those kind of dire situations can be content with what they have, then so should we. You know what I mean? And in such a, we live in America. We live in a place that's blessed to have freedom in so many different aspects of our lives, and we're called to live in that contentness. That contentment, and Paul is calling us to do that. He's giving us the guides. He's giving us the practical ways to use this in our day-to-day lives. So I think this is just so key. It's just such a key to life,
Yeah, and I was slapped with joy about 2 years ago when I went to Peru. Like you said, in the missions, I went with Comunidad Chinacolo it's like a missionary house, but it's like an orphanage as well, and all the orphans in there, just seeing their joy, like knowing that they literally, I mean, they're really well provided for, but knowing that they lack a huge, they like that, like, I don't know, they know for some reason, like they are where they are because at one point they weren't loved, most, and I say it because most of the orphans in Peru are literally found on the street, and it's it's a terrible situation because sometimes these families can't provide for them, and sometimes they leave them out for that reason, because they know the outcome, they will be picked up or some way or another, and it's just seeing the joy in their face. Maybe they're not aware of that that kind of reality, but they're just so content. And most of them don't have this right here. It's like something to compare their life with. They're just content with who they are, in where they are, with what they have in the given moment. And I was slapped with that really, really hard, really hard. But yeah, bro, it's a beautiful thing, and we're all called to a life of contentment.
Yeah.
Paul says it numerous times, and Christ just wants us to be happy and to love ourselves. But most importantly, replacing everything that we think gives us contentment with him himself, the
Yeah.
person of Jesus.
Yeah, man. So I just definitely think that we should follow Paul's lead in this, and we should start to live our lives comparing ourselves not to the world, not to other people and what they might have, not to even ourselves and what we might have. Let's compare ourselves to the person of Jesus, man, and let's follow in Paul's example and living in contentment. So thank you guys once again for joining us for another episode of Small Like Paul in our series, What Paul Says About. Fill in the blank here. You guys let us know what you guys want us to talk about next. We are really excited to be doing these and really, diving into these topics that Paul sheds so much light on. So, guys, as always, please make sure you're helping and supporting us. We really appreciate which way you can support us, whether it be subscribing to the YouTube channel and hitting that notification bell. Smash that subscribe button. Smash that like. Leave a comment
All
for
the good
us.
things.
Leave a comment for us. Right now, even though we are on our Exodus fast, we are going to be on our social media more or less, so we can put this content out for you guys. So follow us on social media at Small Like Paul, on Facebook, on Instagram, all that good stuff, and just keep up with us. We're going to be releasing a lot more of these. We're planning on doing some interviews soon, so we're really excited for what's to come. And thank you guys as always, because in order to become great in the eyes of God, we must first become little. So thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time. God bless and peace.